And this is the Westall case. I want to share the screen again. You can see right where we're talking about, right by Melbourne, Australia.
Melbourne.
I don't quite say it the true Aussie way. It's true.
I spent a long time there. So
Melbourne is how they like to say it. And I'm sure I'm not getting it quite right. Love the Aussies. Some of the nicest, most just genuine people like you would ever meet.
Most hospitable,
totally.
wonderful people.
If you can't get along with anyone from Australia, then there's something wrong with you. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is where the Westall School was, just outside Melbourne in a place called Clayton. And this is now April 6th, 1966. So about a year, almost a year after the Maurice Mas incident in France. So this is an incredible case because you've got about 200 students and teachers who see an object. Here's a nice picture. Look at these kids. Like, this is some of the kids in the school. Like, they're not little children that you can just say, oh, you don't know what you saw. These are very sharp looking kids, in my opinion. They're in their, different ages, but many of them are in their teens.
This is a high school, right? This is a high school. So they're a little bit older than, say, the Zimbabwe case.
That's right, from 1994, who are much, much younger.
Which was another school case.
So we don't really have an explanation. This is almost, it's more than 50 years later now, and there's no explanation as to what happened. You've got a lot of evidence, a lot of testimony. It's not all exactly the same testimony, but it's close enough that you clearly know something important happened. And I'm just going to jump ahead here and say the Australian government has given basically nothing on this case. The Australian military has given nothing on this. And you've got these ridiculous explanations like weather balloon. I'm like, are you serious? We'll get to all of that. So the kids, this is one drawing. There's a couple of really good artists' renditions of this. Basically, the kids have been out. It was like a recess or sporting event, and they're heading back in. I think they were playing cricket.
This was actually 11 in the morning, and it was right before recess. So because there were all these different grades, a lot of them were doing different things. Some of them were in class, and some of them were out on the field, playing cricket, like I assume like a gym class kind of thing. So it happened right before recess, and that's why you get these differing accounts. Some of them were already outside, some of them were inside the building. Right.
And so they look up and it's like, there's a flying saucer. And then years later, this is what they're all saying. Yeah, we all looked up and we saw like this was a flying saucer. And a lot of these witnesses are like, this was not a weather balloon. I'm adamant this was not a balloon. This is not any aircraft, nothing conventional. One witness, this is typical. He says it was a round silver disc, seemed to be very low over the school. And I remember kids screaming and running. Some were running toward it and some were running inside. And there were teachers inside and outside who also saw this thing. So now, did you read this whole thing? There's the initial disc, whatever this thing was seen, and then witnesses saw a collection of smaller objects circling around it or following it, about 5 of them.
Some people described it as sort of one main saucer and then these 5 smaller craft that were buzzing around it, Right. That's how I heard it described over and over.
This drawing has like birds, but this isn't really quite what we're talking about here. Let me move on to the next image. Now, some witnesses saw multiple objects, didn't they?
That's right. Some of them saw 3 craft.
Right.
Some of them said they saw 1 craft. But again, I think this is because people were in different areas. I mean, there could be other reasons too, but there are different accounts. And I think that's what you expect when you get a lot of people reporting it, and some are looking out of windows and some are,
So what we do know what happened, I don't know what happened to the 5 objects that were around it. They seem to be gone after a brief period of time, it seems to me. At least one object, maybe more than one object, goes toward, and they have a nearby area they all called the Grange. It was like a pasture. And some of the kids ran off after at least one of these objects that either landed or appeared to land. Let's see what images I have here. And these are some descriptions that people have given of the object. There was one girl named Tanya.
That was drawn by a witness,
Do you want to talk about Tanya?
Yeah. Well, Tanya was apparently the first to reach the site. There
Right.
was there were a group of 3 girls, as I understand it, that
Mhm.
ran out. Now, I was listening to the account of one of them.
Was that Jacqueline?
This was actually Terry Peck.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So she runs out with Tanya and another girl. The other 2 girls get ahead of her.
Mm-hmm.
And she said Tanya was, one of them was hysterical and one of them fainted. So it was Tanya who was hysterical. Now, there was another girl there named, I think it was Jackie.
Yeah.
And she wasn't quite at this area yet. She said Tanya came running out of the Grange towards her, screaming. So instead of pursuing and going to the craft, she ran back to the school with Tanya.
Okay.
Tanya.
There were some claims that Tanya had touched the craft.
I don't know about that, but Tanya
knows?
got taken away in an ambulance.
Right.
And this part of the story comes up later. It gets really interesting.
This is Jackie Arjun was her name, is the friend's name, Jacqueline Arjun.
Yes.
Because years later,
right.
she talked quite a lot about this. In fact, I know I've got a picture of her. Here's some more images. So you can just see, according to the descriptions, we're not talking a huge craft here. That's the size of a adult man. And let's see what else we've got here. I don't know who drew this craft.
There was a gentleman, I don't know his name. He was a young boy at the time, and he said he saw 2 crafts.
Okay, so that's
and
his
he was
description then.
super close to them. He said there was heat coming off them, but he witnessed the 2 side by side like this.
So you want to go back to Tanya, though. What happened with her? She gets taken off in an ambulance.
So Tanya gets taken away in the ambulance, and nobody ever sees her again.
And her friend Jacqueline tried to visit her.
Her friend, tries to visit her the next day, goes to the house where she's always gone to visit her.
Right.
And there's someone there who is not Tanya's mother, because Tanya's mother did not speak English. This person spoke English and said Tanya never lived here.
This is Jacqueline Arjun in a documentary many years later.
That's right.
As an adult. She had a lot to say. She's a really good witness to this case.
She is.
There are other good ones as well, but I really like listening to her. You can find documentaries and information interviews with her out there on YouTube and on the web.
She's in a documentary called Westall 66, a suburban UFO mystery.
And this is from that
People want to
documentary,
check it out.
I believe.
Yeah.
So one of the things, can I just say one thing she says is, like, after the object or objects left, the school principal calls an emergency assembly of the whole school and all the faculty. And this is what he says: what you saw wasn't real. It didn't happen. And no one ever should talk about this ever again.
And if you do, you're going to get in trouble.
And there were men in suits. No one knew who these guys were. They were apparently government officials, military, who knows. And they are talking to the children. And they're saying, what you saw was nothing but an experimental craft. And by the way, don't ever talk about this again. Jacqueline Arjun talks about this. In fact, I got a quote from her in here. I'm just going to show it. So she talks about it. She says, I was called down to the headmaster's office. There were 2 well-dressed men in suits. They were introduced to me in person, and I don't know where they came from. And I just love hearing her talk. She says, we went into, I suppose you think you saw a flying saucer. I said, well, I didn't say that. I said I saw an object. And we suppose you saw little green men. So she's, talking about how they're essentially just dismissing her. This is a newspaper article. This is one of the only documentary sources of the case.
I just want to add that she actually claims that they were quite bullied by these mysterious men that were coming to the school.
Yeah, I think she said she burst into tears after she left the meeting. Like, they were really heavy-handed, these guys. There are no Australian government records of this event. People can only work off the newspaper. Even though the principal said no one talks about this, journalists did get wind of it, and they did do an investigation. But the impression you get from this is, like, because there was this heavy-handed silence that came down right away on this case, a lot of good information didn't come out.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the school really shut that down.
Yeah.
But, it did get some media attention because it was on the front page of the local paper. and it ran for a couple of weeks. And they also had a Channel 9, I guess, in their area, TV news spot on this. And some of the kids were actually interviewed for that. And excuse me, they got in trouble for it. They actually got detention. Joy Clark is one of those people who claims that she got detention for speaking to them. You know?
Yeah.
So
amazing. In 1966 in Australia, I guess they felt they could do that. This was on the weather balloon explanation. Actually, was put out there when it was reported. People were told that a weather balloon had been released earlier that morning. You've got only the most dense or obstinate government spokespeople, in my opinion, could possibly believe the weather balloon explanation. And yet, even recently, Australian TV put out a little piece on this when the documentary came out. And they bring out this talking head who says, oh, yes, weather balloons can really surprise people. I'm like, this is 2010, buddy, and you're still actually trying this out.
Well, you've
got to be kidding.
They on the anniversary of this, 60 years later, I believe, they asked these kids, because they're adults now, and they said, what do you think of the whole weather balloon thing? And they all said, I mean, that's crazy. I know what I saw.
Right.
I know what I saw. All of them are, sticking to their story. It was...
The principal years later says, this is a direct quote, I was prepped to tell the students that what they had seen didn't exist. Here's another witness. It was not an aircraft by any stretch of the imagination, and it certainly was not a weather balloon. When the local Melbourne News wanted to cover this years later, they looked through the archives and they found all the original video of the event was missing.
That's right.
It's like, where did that go? This is Paul Smith. He was one of the witnesses. He says, I looked up and I was facing the object in the sky, and he thought someone figured out how to project an image into the sky. He says, this is just too crazy. It was like too good of a flying saucer. This could not be real. Mm-hmm. And he said, after a while, trucks turned up, looked like army trucks. And there was one of the teachers had said that a man in a dark blue suit demanded all photos taken.
That's right. There was a woman in particular, I think she was a chemistry teacher there, and she had taken a whole bunch of pictures. And, as soon as this happened, she just grabbed her camera and just took tons of photos. And they did. They confiscated not only the pictures, but the cameras.
Yeah, I mean, just incredible stuff. And yet this is all from a weather balloon. You've got to be kidding me.
Right.
Even years later, the Australian government was moving toward the position of saying, or at least some military spokesperson anyway was saying, well, maybe, there's all kinds of secrets and there's experimental craft. But what could this be 50 years later? Mm-hmm. Like that they're still going to deny. One teacher was named Andrew Greenwood. He actually said that 2 officers came to his home and threatened him under the Official Secrets Act and said, you couldn't have seen a flying saucer at Westall because, well, there's no such thing as flying saucers. And if you talk about this, we will tell everyone that you're an alcoholic. The guy was not an alcoholic.
Wow.
These are some more of the witnesses, by the way. These are just very, very good, straightforward people. So
I just want to read one more witness.